There's trouble.
We accept check.
Okay.
And you can. Make sure that
Trustees.
And you're all set?
I am. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Well, welcome everybody. Good to have you here for the 22nd meeting of the Tompkins County Independent Redistricting Commission. Those on the virtual connection, my name is Hank DeLay. I serve as chair of the commission. We'll start with taking the roll, and Brittany, if you would do that for us, please.
Absolutely.
Here.
Jeffrey True,
Here.
Carolyn Chang. Here. Sarah has asked to be excused. Elliot Emel. Here. Bink.
Here.
Marsha Lynch. Here. Margaret Hobby. Here. Vivek Iyer.
Here. Very much. First order of business on our agenda is the approval of minutes from the meeting of March 8th. It's been distributed to all of you. I have a motion for your approval.
So move.
Moved by Jeff. Then by Margaret. Any comments, revisions, deletions? All indicate either by saying yes or raising a hand.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Opposed? Unanimously approved. Next item that I have is on the agenda is input from legislators, municipal officials, and the public. I'm looking around and I don't see any members of the municipal category or the legislators, but from the public. Oh, I'm sorry. It's
I am a
you
legislator.
are. Okay, my apologies.
I got a haircut. It's
Okay.
Are you sure?
Sure, yeah.
I wasn't sure how to were coming.
You have to keep me away from him away from me.
I don't actually have any input.
So
Offer.
just for the record, you state your name.
Oh, yes. My name is Veronica Pillar, county legislator for what is currently District 2. And I'm just here to listen and learn more to the process y'all are going through.
Okay, well, welcome. Nice to have
Thank
you
you.
with us.
Look at these.
Grab a
There's also extra copies up there.
set of maps to look at and so forth. I don't see that we have any other members of the public on the screen. Okay. Next on the agenda then, update on progress of the City of Ithaca Redistricting Working Group. Well, as I sent you a note the other day, I'm pleased to report that the city's working group has developed a map which has, as of today, been put on the City of Ithaca Redistricting Working Group website. Distributed to you a copy of the map that the city group is asking for comments from the public. You'll see that it is significantly different from the current map for the 5 city wards. Most dramatically, there's a difference in Ward 1, which is the ward on the western boundary of the city, which no longer is connected to South Hill, but rather goes somewhat further into the downtown area. There is also a significant change in that the North Campus of Cornell's campus is no longer connected to the Bell Sherman area, but rather is connected to Cornell Heights and then down into the area along Lynn Street. That's the green, dark green district. Main campus, Cornell, connected to the College Town area. And then you have a significant district that runs from Stewart Avenue on the east down to Meadow Street and goes up and includes a significant portion of Fall Creek. So the working group has published as well a narrative, identifies the process that we have followed, identifies the criteria that have been followed by the working group. Those are taken directly out of the state statute in the municipal home rule law governing local redistricting. It identifies the fact that the working group has done its best to balance the need for equal population among all of the wards with the desire to meet the other standards of contiguity, compactness, communities of interest. Those communities include both traditional neighborhood associations and also recognize the community of interest status of students attending Cornell, but also there are in College Town, as we know, significant number of students from Ithaca College who are there. Note in the narrative that although a number of members of the public who have attended our public input sessions of this county commission and the joint session that we held one evening with the city working group, spoken to the issue of low voter turnout, that is not a legitimate issue for the purpose of redistricting, while it most certainly can be an issue that the Board of Elections can take into consideration when identifying polling sites. The narrative goes on to invite members of the public, certainly common council members and media to provide comments to the working group at our next session, which is 1 week from this evening on March 29th. So I invite your attention to that site on the City of Ithaca website. And I'll stop there and ask if any of you have any questions.
Greg, on some of the, on the maps that you give us, you tell us what the perfect number would be, as it were. I don't see what that zero number would be for the city. You know what I'm talking about there?
6,421.
Right. 6,421.
That's the ideal population for a city ward. Total city population divided by 5.
Thank you.
Looking up to see if Vivek has any comments or concerns. I don't want him to be forgotten in this process, or Elliot as well. No?
I'm good.
Vivek has his palm tree in the background. Clearly enjoying warm temperatures somewhere.
I'm home with the kids. My wife is in Portugal enjoying the warm weather.
Thank you. Elliot, any questions or comments from you?
No questions or comments, thanks.
Okay, thank you. With that, let's then move on. And I'll turn to Greg to introduce some additional maps which have been shared with us during the last week, and thank both him and Svetla for all the work that they've done to put them together.
Let's start with D1. At the conclusion of the last meeting, you'll remember we were given the directive to work on scenarios 15 and 16. The first challenge in doing so was to balance P1 from 15 and 16, close to 5%, not ideal. So we went back to the books and worked on the existing configuration of both those scenarios to balance them. So we're going to start this evening's discussion with that. From there, we did two other scenarios for 15 and 16, which I'll talk about afterwards because they're a little bit different in concept. And it was during the course of this work that the city had made their decision. So we were able to incorporate some of their boundaries into the last version of our scenarios. I'll talk about that in a second. So 15A, 1A, we went back and reworked it. If anyone is interested, the older maps as well got those taped to the tables in the back. If anybody's interested in the original version of 15B1, 16B1, or 13, 14, and 17 scenarios are right there as well. So I'm going to go back in time. So 15B1A, Spella did her magic and balanced that out accordingly. We didn't spend a lot of time in the city in this one. We just started presenting it as the way it was initially done. We didn't go back and rework and look at the city boundaries to make adjustments because this is kind of a weird one for me, and I hope you don't choose it. I'll just leave it at that. So the first attempts that Svetla and I did were 16 for all of them, primarily in 15, 16. We're just kind of doing our best to balance the numbers, and we were just exploring.
The great thing about this room is that happens. There should be a way to, so it doesn't go off, but I don't know what that is.
I don't know either. Brittany, do you know anything about?
No, I don't.
Somebody needs to stand up and go like this every once in a while. That's.
So I think the discussion around both 16B1A and 15E1B1A is that we balance them, but best to move on. If you care for me to explain in more detail tonight, I can do so. There might be good parts of it, but it's kind of weird in my view, the way that when you get into the scenarios of 15 and 16, the biggest difference is the village of Kew Heights and the village of Lansing cannot stay together without splitting them out. And then you run the risk of the interpretation of the 40% rule and breaking one of the rules, the state, which is, number second one, about no villages, cities, or town except those having 40% of a full ratio of a district to be divided. So it becomes really difficult to read that and keep the village of Lansing and Kew Heights together for 15 and 16. Well, in our future scenarios for 15, 16, we separated out village of Kew Heights and Lansing in separate districts. So that's a big difference, a big change. It might be possible, but it's going to be mathematically, I have to run some numbers, but we'd have to make a decision on splitting one of those villages in a way that would make sense to meet that rule, which is going to be tough. So I took the executive decision of keeping them separated from the start, but we can always go back and look at scenarios that keep them together, but a part of one of the villages has to split up.
Mhm.
I noticed that.
Okay,
So let's pause there for a moment
yes.
and any questions or comments that you'd like to raise about on a positive, negative?
I see among those criteria, the districts must be compact, and this is certainly not ideal when you look at the criteria.
No, we, on this one, we started from the inside out. We did the city, and then we went to the villages. And I was trying to keep the villages intact and then trying to figure out what to add to the villages. It's fairly easy with Cuba Heights to add the eastern part of the town of Ithaca. But once you get into Lansing, then you have a challenge. If you go north, then you shift from the town of Lansing and the town of Groton, and the Groton goes down into Dryden, right? Or you do what I did here, which is kind of weird. You shift the population east towards Dryden to add to Lansing. And that's what this scenario was done. I did that not to disrupt Lansing and Groton. Try to figure out another way to do it.
Yeah, districts 12 and 13 are not really, those look like butterflies.
And this was also the concept where I started to consider Ellis Hollow as its own area or district, and that's District 11 that you see.
And am I correct that I think I counted that there are, Dryden is in 5 different districts?
Yeah.
Yes,
I think that's a problem.
yeah, it is.
Do I read these correctly in that neither of these scenarios, 15 or 16, you have to bleed into the town from the city of Ithaca?
For 15A, we do the town, on the campus in the north part of campus, the dorms are, joins to the town of Ithaca to that greenish military color District 5. So that goes over into the town and into Dryden.
And section District 4 goes from the city out into the town as well.
No, Districts
No,
1, 2, 3, and 4 stay within the city. District 5 extends into the town of Ithaca, into Dryden.
What about this into here?
yeah, that's
Like-
fine.
Oh, 5, oh, sorry, yeah.
Here, it looks like 4.
Well, yeah,
You're on the A, yeah, okay.
that's District 6.
That's what you're saying.
Well, okay, and I was asking about.
You're going ahead.
I'm sorry. Okay, Mr. Chairman, I will get back with the program.
If we look at the numbers, then with 15 districts, city of Ithaca has 4.55 times the ideal population. Yeah, it's neither close to 4, neither close to 5. So you have to expand to.
You're saying that mathematically, we're going to be looking at something that bleeds into the town.
For 15 and 16, no doubt.
Right.
It's
Yes.
possible not to.
Just turn and ask Steve DeWitt, the Board of Elections. Do you have any comments? Steve, I'll ask you.
I would
We go along.
15-1A.
Yeah, right, where we are at the moment.
Oh, that's, yeah. I had to look at the city a lot more closely. It looks like it's fairly close to what the city passed. Going out in the towns, I'd have to really take a closer look at the Cuba Heights and Lansing, and of course Dryden is the 4. You say Dryden's in 4.
5,
5. That could be problematic too.
Right.
Could be creating a whole pile of election districts. Yeah, I don't like this map much at all.
okay. Unless we have anything further on V1-A, move along.
I'm going to switch to 16B1-A next because 16.1BA, we balanced it out at a 4.22% deviation. But I think we felt so badly about what we did for the village of Lansing and the village of Cuba Heights, we tried to start there. and really pay attention to see if we could balance them out first. And so I really like if you would show 16E1. Maybe it's underneath the black. Yeah. Anyway, what was nice, the one thing I do like about this scenario is that it takes the village of Lansing and attaches it to the southern part of the town of Lansing, which is a kind of a community of interest, and they run into each other. And it takes Cayuga Heights and adds it to the population of the town of Ithaca adjacent to Cayuga Heights to the east, which is kind of similar as well. So that part of it was good. The city of Ithaca, though, bleeds out, joins into
Two directions.
three.
Oh, three.
To the west
Okay, that's right.
area, we had to
Yeah.
grab some population for District 1. We had to take the shoreline along the lake to the eastern side, which is in the town of Ithaca, and add it to District 5 in the city. And then some population from the east side of the town of Ithaca near campus, we had to add to District 4. This was the first scenario where we started to look at boundaries for the city lines as well. So we tried to start there as well in this scenario. So you'll see it's not, there's some differences, but it's close. It's really close for what was proposed for the city. But the rest of the county, it wreaks havoc in the rural area of the county. I'll just leave it at that. So we started from the inside out. But you'll see that this is an example where the Lansing populations gets really pushed into Groton quite a bit. Takes up half all the way to the village of Groton. You've got to try to keep it between two municipalities. You got to go all the way to the village, which then you got to drop down to Dryden for Groton and include Freeville. So that causes a big mess. And then if you go around, it gets messier because Dryden then gets associated with half Caroline.
Yeah.
And then
Right.
Danby gets associated with part of Newfield, part of Caroline. 15 looks good. But Ulysses and the rest of the rural areas, it becomes a little bit of complication when you take that approach on 16. So for the same reason, I'm hoping that we can keep this conversation short and we can move on to the next areas, which I think do a better job of balancing it.
Okay, comments from anyone?
Stand up and do it.
Well, we should all just get up and stretch
Right.
a couple of minutes.
I go break.
Terrible thing about this meeting in this room.
Last time you mentioned, and I'm all for that, having Freeville and Dryden Village in the same district.
Yeah.
Has advantages and.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Knows, but
I know there's a way to override it, but.
That was a requirement for today.
Yeah, Mike.
Or we can at least be glad that the media aren't on the screen with us at the moment. The variety of comments
that would be
that
a
we be made.
novel concept these days.
Another commission operating in the dark, is that?
Yes.
You know, I'm gonna just keep on going on if that's okay with you guys until we figure out the lights, hopefully. So I think we left off with the value of spending any more time on 16. Okay, then I'm gonna move on to back to 15, if that's okay. And I'm gonna start with 15B2.
15B2.
Right. And after working on balancing 15B1A and 16B1A, we took a radically different approach. And we started with some of the work that Jan did, and then we started with the concept of outside in, right? So we tried to take a completely different approach. And this one is even different because we started with lakefront as a community of interest, right? So we thought about what would happen if we said, okay, the entirety of the lakefront outside of the city of Ithaca on either side is covered by a single district. What happens if you run districts just along the lakefront? And that was, you know, it has been established on the west side of the lake, but we tried to make it on the east side of the lake and added the village to the lakefront instead of the southern pedal landscape. And that worked out pretty well. But so, and we didn't really do much in the city in terms of the adjustments, but that can be happening based on what came out of their scenario. This was before the city made the decision, so we didn't spend much time. And we got balanced and we just stopped there. What I don't like about this scenario is District 9, which is like this no man's land in between Dryden and Lansing. But it tries to do a better job at Groton as well. I'm sorry, Dryden. It's 3, 2, but it gets closer. Always.
Well. Still.
Go get some.
Here we go. Oh.
Right.
Oh, you can't sleep?
Yeah.
Okay. Did I miss anything? Sorry.
No.
Talk about District 9, and the population is around the airport in that district.
Yes. It's north and east of there. The other thing that I don't like is that we tried to maintain our best to keep the Ellis Hollow district in play, but we had to jump over into Caroline to do so, to Brookendale area.
You did before, didn't you?
Yeah, you did
Yeah.
that before.
Yeah.
It's not very
We were
much
trying our
of
best
it.
to keep
Actually,
Andy and
that's
Caroline together.
That's a fair amount of population there in Carolina. That you-
And Newfield gets split.
But Enfield's.
Enfield stays whole.
Enfield,
It's whole, but
Stays
Yeah.
entirely intact.
yeah.
all power to the board of Enfield.
Right. This one has some merit. It just, it's a different approach, but I think when Svel and I were working on this and the maps, it makes I think what we realize is that it's important to take a radically different approach to starting something and see what the results are. This is
Tend to think for Newfield that there's somewhat of a community of interest between that portion of Newfield and West Danby.
Hard to get way up from here, but that's true.
And I know probably Newfield wouldn't like being split, but I've always kind of thought that West Danby is a little bit different and more of a community than off the side of Danby proper.
And here for the city, you've got the main campus plus the north campus connected with the town.
only one area joined in that campus.
I think it's too bad that that splits South Hill, that, that flank of South Hill with the street
Yeah.
and Pleasant and Crest. I think
That whole area is really difficult in this project because all the population in the dorms that I see,
Right.
and then all the subdivisions below that. So you're gonna see that is a pretty common approach to the mapping, unfortunately. So the way that kind of the wraps around from the west towards IC, you have to differentiate, sometimes between the population of campus and the population outside of campus, just to the south. I see. But you're right, it kind of, in my mind, goes together.
Is there any significant impact on this from the city redistricting recommended map?
This was one that we did without taking into consideration the city boundaries, but that can be readjusted. It's got
Anything more on version 2? Or shall we move on?
And I have the feeling that the east-west distances in District 12 and 8 get pretty large. That might be quite a distance to get to a polling station.
Yeah, District 8 becomes a little bit strange as it extends all the way into Lansing. But, it's pretty significant amount of property up there.
Okay, let's move along.
Okay, D3 for 15. Is a little bit different approach. This is one where we looked at the villages of Lansing and Key Heights and tried to split one of them under the 40% rule.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if we're entirely successful at what we tried. And so this is going to take some more work. And what that resulted in is less complication around the towns, the rural areas. You'll see, for instance, that Groton extends a little bit into, extends into Lansing further than it does now.
Mhm.
Village of Cuba Heights sections of Village of Lansing get associated with the southern part of Lansing or the lakefront of Lansing. Dryden only gets put into 2 districts, which is great. Caroline and Danby primarily stay together with a different section from the town of Ithaca, but not the King Road section, but a little difference. 14 is pretty much closer to what it is between Enfield and Newfield. And the Ulysses, Trumansburg, town of Ithaca district stays pretty close to where it is now. And
So
again,
on the west side, you have the entire lakefront in the one district.
right, and then on the east side, it's entirely in one district, with the exception of the section of population that gets associated. Yes, let me talk about 2 things here, which are big ones. For the city, you've got the East Shore area, which is in the town of Ithaca, associated with District 5 in the city, or Ward 5, or District 5 with Wedge, right? So you'll see that Renwick Heights area and East Shore Drive in the town of Ithaca gets, the population gets associated with the city. And then the radical difference here is on the west side of the city, District 1, you'll see the amount of population in the town of Ithaca that has to be incorporated on the west side for the town to balance the numbers. And so I just wanted to show you what that looks like.
I mean, I noticed that and I thought, is there really community of interest there going that far and going to the Enfield town line?
Well, I wasn't sure. I thought we would take a different approach and show you what it looked like to merge the city population in with the west side, not the east side.
You have, I forget which, I guess it's the next one on version 2. You go into the town on the west side, but not as dramatically as in 15B3.
No, B2 still goes only to the east, not the west. This is the first scenario where we looked at combining other populations for the town of Ithaca with the city. And so in 2 locations. Do it.
It's 16B2 goes to the west.
Yes.
That's what I meant.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah, yeah.
Yes. 16.
I count 7 council members in the town of Ithaca here.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yes, 7.
That's in wonder which one.
15.
D3.
D3.
Yeah, Jan raises a good point. In all these, we should be counting the number of city seats
Right.
that cross into the town.
Yep.
It gets kind of messy.
Yeah.
Town will
Yeah.
really like it.
Anything more on 15B3?
And B2. 16B2. It's the next one over. This we call outside in. We started from the outside and went in, right? So we looked at some of the Lansing looks really good, the town of Lansing, the kind of
Yeah.
draws the line north of
Right.
the village and,
Yeah.
and differentiates that. Groton doesn't feed over into Lansing anymore, which is great. The village of Cuda Heights gets associated with population to the north of I'm sorry, the village of Lansing gets associated with some of the population in town of Ithaca, but it still bleeds over into Dryden. So without going further north for that district, then 7 has to go all the way to the village of Freeville, which is kind of weird. So we tried to do it a little bit differently. So Dryden, unfortunately, when you take that approach with the village of Lansing, gets split into multiple, at least 4 districts. So that causes another complication. Caroline and Danby are perfect. Newfield and Enfield are really close to what they are right now.
Right.
Along with Ulysses is actually improved because it doesn't go into the town of Ithaca in this area.
Just in Tenfield.
Right,
Mhm.
just in Enfield. So we tried to keep, we tried to do our best to keep, to after the last one, like we went, it's like, okay, well, let's see what we can do for the town of Ithaca this time, right? So we started with an idea of trying to keep the town of Ithaca as intact as possible. That led to an interesting scenario for the west part of the town of Ithaca. So you're going to get a sense of the population and the complication with IC. When you start in the northwest corner of the town of Ithaca and you wrap around, one, you can't take in the dorms of IC without it making it look like a mess. So this one takes the campus of IC, shifts it over to the district to the east, but everything else goes to the west district, including all the southern population below IC.
So the campus of IC is in 13.
Is in 13. That is correct. Yep.
That light green area in District 1 in.
Right. So the northern, District 1 leads out, or not leads out, but includes then part of the West Hill area. So that's from 79 south and down to Elm Street Extension. And out, I don't know exactly what the western edge of that is.
Right, I was wondering if it was a screen, but I couldn't think what
It might be, we just kept on grabbing blocks until it bounced. We said, okay, we could, if you, this is kind of got weird, because if you go south along, towards the southeast corner of the city, you got to wrap around to get enough population. So you don't go further west, but you go further south and you got to wrap around. And then the district from the town of Ithaca looks really crazy because it extends all the top all the way around. More stuff until the sightseeing.
I think this is an impressive one so far, given what you've done with several of the towns.
I can't. That's what I was asking. We're about to lose the maps on the screen. I apologize for that.
This version 2, though, the city is pretty much very similar to what the city passed for their redistricting.
No, there's some more work that has to be done to balance it out. But now that I know, no, it is close. I'm sorry. This is the first one where we started to look at the city.
Yeah.
Fall Creek is just downtown. Yes, I'll get to the city differences in a second, if you don't mind. But yes, this is the first one where we got really close to the city. Next one is probably better situation. Let's see.
Version 3.
Yep.
And 16.3.
Okay, 16.3.
I'm sorry, can I just ask for a moment, what has happened with the screen that?
The power on the computer that was being shared just went out. And so Oh, yeah. So if you could bring up 16B3, that'd be great, Brittany.
See, while Brittany is doing that, we've been joined by County Legislator Michael Lane. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you. Would like to have been here from the beginning, but my law office didn't let me.
It's all the fun, I tell you. So Mike, just so you know, we have gone through about 5 new maps that have been prepared for us by Greg and Svetla. We're now getting up to scenario 16 version 3. So this next map that we'll be looking at is assuming the county legislature of 16 seats.
So the total deviation on this one is 5.01. So all right. So this scenario, D3. Let me start again in the village of Lansing and the village of Cayuga Heights because there's a difference there. So the village of Lansing and the village of Cayuga Heights are completely intact in different districts. We had to grab some population in the town of Lansing above the village of Lansing, and then wrap around into the town of Ithaca to the south into the subdivisions below that. Cayuga Heights gets associated with the enough population to the east of the village to make it whole and to balance it out. So that was a different approach in terms of balancing the populations. So the village of Lansing gets associated with the population of the southern part of the town of Lansing and the northeast corner of the town of Ithaca. Much different than anything you've ever seen before. Cayuga Heights, though, gets really becomes geographically very small because it picks up the population of the entire village and the populous area just to the east of the village. You know, it's Hasbrook primarily is the big one there. The city of Ithaca, I'll talk about how we need to do a little bit more to balance with the exact lines in a second. But the city of Ithaca, the approach there for the adjoining populations with the town is different. We look along the lakefront to instead of the perimeter of the city to join it. And actually it works out pretty well in terms of numbers. So we took the whole, so in the city scenario, the high school area, which has 0 population, gets associated with Ward 2. But we put it into Ward or Legislative District 5 and grab the Renwood Heights and Eastwood Drive and associated with District 5. And then District 1 gets associated with the lakefront in the town of Ithaca to the west.
And that goes up then to the border with Ulysses.
Yes.
Yeah.
And my recollection from 2005 is that that's what existed previously.
At the entire triangle to the east of 96. We tried to keep that intact, but it was too much population. But this resulted in a pretty clean legislative district 16 in the town of Ithaca. But again, you'll see that, Margaret, the problem with the Ithaca College and the southern population. District 13 in the town of Ithaca stays intact in this that corner down there.
So District 13 has the IC campus?
No, District 16 has the IC, the primary part of the IC campus. District 13 has some of the population of IC students and families below IC. So circle. Like
College circle apartments.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's too bad that is split.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of population between College Circle apartments and the dorms. I see it's really hard to do.
Yeah.
But if you then expand into the county areas, Lansing, the town of Lansing looks great. Groton shifts into Dryden instead of Lansing as it does now. Dryden is still primarily east and west. Danby and Caroline stay completely.
Dryden, you have the two villages in the same
Yeah,
district.
Freeville and the village of Freeville and village of Dryden are still in the eastern district. Danby and Caroline stay completely intact. And Enfield and Newfield are adjusted a little bit. We had to grab more of Enfield to give to the District 15 in that scenario, so that it's once you cross over some now, we played with a line just to move it north and south, but it was really hard. So we just took a different approach and grabbed the black area to the east of the town of Enfield, keeping the hamlet of Enfield intact in all these cases. In the city of Ithaca, there are three areas that differ from the city ward proposal. I'm going to talk about those next if it's okay. Fun. The first one I already mentioned, and that is to add the 2 blocks for the high school and for the middle school into District 5 instead of the 2 pure population. The second change is that the block, which is associated with the city court, the police department, and the apartments, we shifted to South Hill District 3. In the city, they have that associated with the downtown district or Ward 2. And we had to do that to balance it out for the county. And then we had to grab the entire section in between Meadow and Fulton Streets and add that to the downtown district and take that away from District 1. So those are the only differences between those.
Say between Meadow and Fulton.
If you look at the city map,
You're on, this is version 3 you're looking at, right?
yep,
Right.
Okay. And you said so for District 2, you had to go and grab that whole area?
in order for us to balance out District 1, we had to take population away from District 1. We had to give population to District 2. So that was the logical move, was to keep on going west into the commercial area. And hold, keep the lines on the north side and south side.
How does that affect the population of the city wards?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
It's like it's about 260 people or so.
Yeah. Yeah, if you look at the city ward maps, the black numbers represent population.
It might not be bad. You take it from the most populous city ward.
What I really find really sort of awkward is 7. It's like Village of Lansing and Forest Home just doesn't.
Right.
not good feng shui.
Yeah, I agree. When we got done with this one, that was at least a favorite aspect of this scenario as well. And so I took a different approach here. We did. So.
Greg, you've been playing with this now enough. You've been doing enough of these. Do you get the sense that if you had one more seat and you went to 17, you would have more flexibility to do things, or you would not, or you don't know?
Well, it changes it completely once you change the number of districts. The scenarios are going to look entirely different. Like, for instance, when we looked at 13 and we did the first one, we're like, oh my God, that looks so perfect, right? But whether that's realistic or not, you know, with the number of seats, it's hard. So it's really hard to say what's going to make sense and balance out. I can tell you that 13 and 17 are better for keeping the city intact. Right?
16. There are 4 districts or 5 districts of the city.
In 16 worked out pretty well, except you have to extend it.
Yeah. I think 16 worked out better than 15.
16 works out really well to try and match the city ward members. There's no doubt about that. We can pretty much make them, identical. But any other scenarios, it's going to be working up solutions for the city that minimize the impact of the elections or confusion with the citizens.
We were to say, sort of in general, that we kind of liked the outline in the outlying areas, what you've done outside. And we were to say, okay, try to keep that as much as you can. And then I'll go work on the city and come back with 3 or 4 versions of that. Would that be the next step that you would want to do? Or
yeah, I think for us, what's important is to walk away this evening, with the work that we've done and say, okay, we really like whatever version of 15 or 16 best. And then we can take another stab at trying to, and tell us what you like about it, what you don't like about it. And then we'll take another shot at trying to correct those things. And then if there's any other scenarios that you want to reconsider or look at again, we can throw those next. But it would be really helpful to, to go through the process and to say, of 15 and 16, our preference is one of those 3, right? And then we can take it away and look at different versions of those and try to correct some of the things. It'll be difficult to correct everything. This is going to be a compromise all the way around. And so what we'll do our best to try to look at it differently to balance it out. But like in B3, the Village of Lansing and Forest Home, wraparound thing was unfortunate, but that was the only way that we could try to maintain the Dryden boundary.
And so Ithaca College really affects that.
Yeah, it does, because the college is like on the southern part of the town. Once you reach that point, you have to decide which way the campus is going to go. It always needs to go to the west because the west side of the town needs the population.
Yeah.
The rest of it below Ithaca College, it adds too much population, right?
Yep.
And all the population for the town of Ithaca in that area is between IC and directly below IC. Right?
speak for myself and say version 16.3, version 3 is the best to my mind. And this to do in a couple of iterations going forward and not do anything on 15. That would be my recommendation.
Jeff has put out that as a proposal. Let me just specifically ask Vivek and Elliot if they have any comments. I don't want to forget them since they're up there on the screen. And assume you've been able to look at the maps as we've been going along. Vivek, any thoughts that you'd like to share?
I like, 16v3. I think it's the best of this, what can be made of the situation. But, I am curious about what, could come from 17, having 17 districts. But, then again, if it's not going to be if it's going to be a tangential, if it's going to be a distraction, then, I would say, we can just take 16 and continue refining it.
Thank you. Elliot?
I agree with Vivek. I think that the 16v3 is the best out of these ones that we've been shown today. But I also don't think that that we should cross off other numbers of districts just yet. That's kind of where I'm thinking.
For my colleagues around this table. Well, Jeff's already commented. Jan?
Yeah, I kind of like the 16v3 the best as well. Yeah, kind of wondering the 17 or 15, the odd numbers also has their advantages. So, I don't want to throw them out yet.
Carolyn?
I'm really torn between 15v3 and 16v3. I mean, there's just parts of each that I really like. So it's hard, when it's.
That's why we get the big bucks.
Right. Yeah, and I keep thinking about Enfield and I am also very curious about what 17 would look like. 17 districts. And if that would in any way alleviate some of these issues of splitting these municipalities.
Sure.
I do like 16.3. I'll tweak whatever, but I remember Greg was talking about the fact that 13 worked really well. And we've talked a lot about 17. And I remember from 17 as it was initially crafted, I hated that because it just did not make any sense with communities of interest and the way things were split. I don't quite recall the issues behind why we threw out 13. So, but I do think that the 16 version 3 does look good overall.
Okay. Many of you have got my 17 map here. Long. You want to take a look at that?
Yeah, 17, the one, once you get into 17, it reverses the population between the city and the town. Now districts has to take a little population from the city. So the numbers are a little bit different that way. So you'll see in this one, we didn't, we haven't spent a lot of time with 17, and I'm sure we can come up with a different and better version. I know for a fact that we've got to grab a little or some population from the city and give it primarily to one of the towns. In this scenario, we just grabbed the dorms in the north part of campus and put it with Big Heights.
Well, that's about 3,000
that's
people.
big. Yeah,
I mean,
it's almost
half
it's a couple of dorms.
A couple of dorms.
Exactly. So although they area looks small, there's a lot of population.
Right.
You are absolutely right. So we try to minimize the visual. I think
It's the same problem with Ithaca college dorms.
for 13 as well, if you'd like me to, Greg.
This is.
Just like to add a note that when I went back and looked at 15v3, and it's actually a pretty decent looking map here. So both v3s, 15 and 16. I just wanted to state that.
Thank you. You got your hand up, Mike?
Only wondering if at some point I might be allowed a little privilege of the floor. I had planned to say some things based on the request I heard last time, and but I don't want to interfere with your meeting if because I missed it because I couldn't get here.
We'll come back to you in a moment.
Thank you.
You want to see 13?
Sure.
Just as an opening, what 13 does is that you can keep the city entirely intact into 4 legislative districts.
Yeah.
And the challenge there is to overlay that with the city ward proposal and see what the election districts are like.
Just for the rest of the group, I'll just repeat that in the city working group, there is a pretty strong consensus on having a continuation of the 5 wards, not only because of the way the numbers work, but also that to have a change in the number of wards require a city referendum. And it's at the same time that there will already be a different referendum on the ballot in November to change the form of government in the city from the so-called strong mayor to city manager form of government. And the working group is hesitant to have these 2 different structural issues presented to the voters at the same time.
At 13, I kind of remember this is the only one that keeps Village of Lansing, Village of Ithaca, and the East Shore area as 1 district, and the rest of the town of Lansing as 1 district. So that looks pretty nice. The town of the 4 reps.
Comments on 13? You have it up on the screen. Or 17.
I think it's pretty easy for us to say, run 20 of these things. And, you'd be like dead. And
Or he just give it off to Svetla.
You look at the wrong person.
So I think we need some sense from you as to a point of diminishing returns. If we were to say to you, go back and try to clean up 16 and give us a couple of versions of 16.
I would tell you you're on the right track to look at V3 for 15.
Right, start there and then go forward.
Those 2, I think you're going to find that the higher we go with the version numbers, the better we get at the scenarios and trying to balance them out.
Okay, and what about 17? Because we've heard some comments about doing 17.
We haven't taken the approach for any other scenarios. It doesn't mean that they couldn't be improved upon. There's no doubt about that. I mean, there are certain things that have pros and cons. And to do so for, additional scenarios, I think is fine. I mean, we can put in the work. This is an important decision.
And knowing what the city is now, as putting that into 17
Right.
might change some things.
Yeah.
Make it a little, couple things.
We'd have that as a reference point to start with in all cases, which is we didn't have before. So we were just guessing at boundaries of the city. So if we eliminate that or try to do our best to match that or work with Steve and Tamara to look at the elections at the same time as come up with something reasonable that makes sense. I can tell you that it probably takes on average only about 2 hours to come up with one of these maps. So
Shouldn't have said that.
Only 2 hours.
You'll have him working on billable hours.
Right. I'll charge it right to there's no budget this budget.
Okay. Let's pause for a moment. And at this point, then I will invite Mike to give his comments that would have been on the agenda earlier had he been able to get here. We're glad that he is here. Mike, go ahead.
Well, thank you for that courtesy. And again, I apologize. But when I attended your last meeting and heard some of the members talk about they really wanted to hear more from legislators, it gave me pause. And so I thought I would come tonight and just make a few comments. And you can take them or leave them. They're just privilege of the floor, obviously. But I wanted to remind folks that when we redistricted back in 2000, the districts for the city reached into the town. And I think it was either 5 or 7. I can't remember the exact number. Maybe Greg remembers of those. And that resulted in the lawsuit from the town of Ithaca against the county because they were not happy. The leadership of the town was not happy at that time with that. So I would just point that out. So keeping the boundaries between the city and the town, as was done in 2000 after 2010 census, is something I think is would be a real good thing to have continued. The number of legislators, I think, makes a difference. When we did the decennial review of the charter a couple of years ago, well, about 3 years ago, some of us strongly suggested reducing the number of allowable legislators from what is currently in the charter. Dula Kiefer strongly opposed that, but she was back in 2001 of 17 legislators too. I would just point that out. I think the trend in many counties is to go to fewer legislators, not more. And I would point out that our chambers is not set up for larger numbers of legislators. We could probably squeeze them in. It was set up for 15 with seats for the 3 direct reports that we always have, which is our county attorney, our county administrator, and our director of finance. If you went to a larger number of legislators, I'm not exactly sure where they would go. And my final comment is that please don't not consider the 13 version. I think having fewer legislators is a way to go. I think based on what I heard at your last meeting was the district seemed to work pretty well at 13. I really think that ought to stay in your consideration. And I'll just end it at that. Thank you for the time.
Sure. Thank you, Mike. Okay. Let me just ask my colleagues on the commission if you have Any thoughts, reactions to our comment from the public, which would have occurred earlier in our meeting? Thoughts about size?
I think if the city is going with 5 wards, that's going to be very difficult to reconcile.
Reconcile.
The 4 wards and the 5 districts. I mean, the 5 wards and the 4 districts. Certainly not opposed to a smaller legislature, but I think, if we went to 17 even, the room could accommodate all those people, I think.
This is a conversation that legislature staff has had. Technically, the table in the chambers can accommodate 17, maybe even 18 legislators by moving the 3 direct report staff people to the other end of the table instead of toward where the chair and the staff sit. So it is certainly possible.
I mean, isn't it better for people to have more representatives? I mean, just in general, doesn't it serve individual citizens and voters to have more representatives who are presumably representing smaller groups, because it allows for more representation and conversation? I don't, it's always my understanding, but what's driving the trend to fewer members in other places? I don't know what that's driven by, but I think in general, my understanding has been that it's better for people.
Political scientists would come back and say, one of the benefits of having a slightly larger group, whether it's from 5 to 8 or 14 to 17 or whatever, is that the smaller group requires the member of the legislature to balance interests. And that if you have members that only represent a particular small neighborhood, if you will, think of the neighborhood as a ward or whatever, that they don't have to listen necessarily in the same way to others and balance off competing interests. So that sometimes there's much more willingness, districts that are larger to come to agreements than where they're narrowly focused.
Or that representative is doing the deciding of which voices are getting heard.
Yeah, that's right. And that's why you elect them.
Yeah.
I'm just saying it's not necessarily clear that it's quote better.
Yeah, no, I just, as I said, I mean, I don't presume to, know anything. I'm just saying.
I'm also not completely sure if it's fair to compare the number of council members. I think it's better to compare those ideal populations. If I read some of those articles, I think Chautauqua County with 20 council members, and I think that is a very small ideal population they started with. No wonder that they reduced the number of legislators. So I think that would be a fairer comparison than the number of legislators themselves.
Okay.
I had a question for Mike. Mike, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you tell us what happened to the lawsuit and after the 2000 election? Was it thrown out? Was it withdrawn? Did they win, lose, draw? What happened?
The county won, and it had to do with the deviations. Greg may remember the details even better than I can. But when it went to the decision by the judge, they upheld the county's plan.
So the threat of lawsuits really is, as long as you stay within the guidelines that we have here and follow those guidelines and you're within the 2.5%, 5% total, we probably should be all right.
I'd ask Mike a different.
Well, then go right ahead, Mr. Chairman.
Variation on your question, Jeff. What was the complaint on the part of the town? Sharing part of the city population.
I think they felt that their influence was actually being diluted rather than increased. Some of us argued that with more representatives, you had a stronger voice in the legislature. At the town of Ithaca, they countered with no, they just won't pay as much attention to their little slivers of the town. So that was the argument I heard.
Okay. Thank you.
The in that reapportionment plan, the town of Ithaca was split into 7 different legislative districts. And also the other complication with that project was that the Census Bureau had messed up the data for the group quarters for the dorms at college North Campus. And they associated a bunch of the dorms to the village of Cuba Heights. So there was about a 3,200 difference in population that got associated with Cuba Heights. And so the amount of time to correct that with the Census Bureau was over a year. And the reapportionment plan of redistricting had to be done as soon as possible. So we worked with Cornell to get the numbers, and we used the local numbers instead of the published numbers for the Census Bureau. So, other twist of that whole lawsuit.
Okay, well, what I'm hearing at the moment is that we have a lot of interest in 16.3 and 15.3. And I wonder, Greg, if you can take a look at those and see if they're tweaking that should be done for those two. Let me ask my colleagues if you have any other particular maps that you would like to have a focus on. And I'm sorry, Margaret, I just asked if Greg could work on variations for 15.3 and 16.3. Now in our next session. And if you had any other different one to add, that would be great.
I sort of like the idea of investigating 17 further. I know it's a whole other thing.
I think in light of the new information from the city, not the one spending 2 hours on it.
If the city boards and districts could be contiguous, that would be nice for the Board of Elections.
You're talking of contiguous, coterminous with the county.
Coterminous, right?
I mean, it'd be great.
That's what I meant.
17 will be a challenge to do so, just to let you know.
Oh, I thought that was one.
No, there's a difference in the population where we have to grab some of the population from the city, about 3,000, to associate with at least one town.
Oh, I'm sorry. I misunderstood that. I thought
Yep.
17 actually worked better.
16 for coterminous is the best for the city.
Then I
16.3.
Then I take back what I said.
So recorded. Ready.
I think that looking at both 15 and 16 does give you an even legislature and an odd legislature. And I think there's a pluses and minuses to do both of those. And if our staff is willing to do that, that's I think.
No, I think that's reasonable.
Yeah.
Everybody else, are we okay with that? Yes, Steve.
Yeah, I like 16, from a board of election standpoint, I like 16 version 3 the best. I think particularly with the city, it's mainly that because it's very close to what the city committee put together. If you're going to look at 15, I would like to see the city districts resemble what the city came up, city county ledge districts to resemble what the city committee came up with for wards. Like 16 doesn't. I don't know if it's possible or not, but I would just keep that in mind when you're.
Yeah, that's where we start.
Yep. Okay. Let me just ask, once again, Elliot and Vivek, I don't want you two to be forgotten up there on the screen. Do you have any thoughts in this regard?
Nothing other than whatever we said. I think, we have a pretty good approach here, expounding on 16 and 15 V3s.
Okay, thank you. Elliot?
I didn't have any other comments. I think what we decided on makes sense.
Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda then is future schedule. We'll meet 2 weeks from now. Brittany, any idea of where we're meeting this time? Since I apologize to everyone for directing you initially back to emergency response. I did read my agenda carefully.
Meeting in 3 weeks on the 12th of April, an extra week. And we will be at the Department of Emergency Response where we were last time.
Okay. I have to adjust some things with the city now. 2 weeks is a problem because
It's a legislature meeting.
okay, well, we can work that out.
Does this facility or the emergency building work better or worse as far as you're concerned?
Well, lighting up there. Yeah.
The other building, I would have preferred to have all the meetings over there, but it wasn't available to see. So we did it over here.
Okay, so that's the future schedule. I'll just repeat, especially since Mike wasn't here at the start of the meeting, that the city map and the accompanying narrative has been posted on the city redistricting work group site. The city group is inviting the public to make comments on that proposed map at its next meeting, which is 1 week from today.
And that's where and what time?
Where it's on the screen. At the moment, we don't have the benefit with the city group of physical presence, 5:30 next Tuesday.
Okay, so by Zoom.
By Zoom.
Okay.
Right. Okay.
Hey, can I ask a question on the city board boundaries?
Yes.
I'm probably going to reach out to Ruth to talk about those slight adjustments to see what the numbers would look like if we're, for the city ward maps, and to see how much complication there is on moving at one block. Because on our
By the
side,
police station.
yeah, right. And I think if I remember correctly, that was one that she had mentioned was in play. And so I'm going to talk to her about that.
Right.
And then shifting the high school and do it.
That's the block he's talking about, I think.
Ward 5, so if it's 2, we can use that zero population block to reach the east shore associated with that legislative district.
Fine. We will, in the city group, of course, want to get whatever comments from the public, including members of Common Council, who we hope will take a look at the proposed map and narrative on their website and give us some feedback. Don't know if they will, but I expect at least some of them will. And that may affect things as well. Great. So that will, in all probability, cause some adjustments to be made.
Yeah, I think from here on out, we'll do our best to coordinate with Ruth on those adjustments and keep each other apprised of the changes.
So that will be on March 29th. And then our session 3 weeks from now.
Okay, can we ask, Mr. Chairman, that the maps be sent to us the Friday beforehand, like last time?
Hey,
You can ask.
right.
But did you find that helpful? There, okay.
Yes, yeah, no.
Right.
We will be great.
Trying to get all of these things out to everybody as soon as possible.
So then the end result is that you're gonna leave it to us to come up with new scenarios for 15 and 16 that expand on the V3
Yes,
basis, right?
that's correct. Any other comments for the good of the order? If not, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Moved by Jeff, seconded by Marcia. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you all very much.